The Backrooms movie leaves 3 huge questions unanswered. What are the rooms? Why does Clark's monster exist and what he represents? And what really happened to Mary in the end? And once you know the answers to all these questions, you'll never see this movie the same way again. So right off the bat, we follow Clark, a guy who accidentally clips out of reality through a doorway in the basement of his closing furniture store. But the back room isn't a dream state or spiritual purgatory. It is a tangible physical dimension. Think of it like a video game glitch. You step on the wrong pixel and you fall out the bounds into an unprogrammed space behind the map. But why did this happen and who opened the door? To understand the lore, we have to talk about the true villains of this universe, the ASYNC Corporation. Back at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, a guy named Philip R. Heyman was doing particle acceleration experiments, literally smashing molecules together at immense speeds. This evolved into ASYNC's massive 1980s operation called Project KV-31. Kane, the creator of the movie, has stated on record that the Backrooms is discovered. It wasn't created by this experiment, and these corporate suits looked at this dimension and they thought, you know what, we can exploit this. Their goal was pure capitalist greed. They wanted to use infinite free real estate or endless land for residential complexes, all with zero property costs. But guess what? They absolutely busted the server. By forcing this portal open, ASYNC weakened the barrier between our world and the Backrooms, causing invisible doorways to randomly spawn all over the globe. And when people cross over, they can be trapped, severely injured, or killed inside, heavily implying that thousands of unexplained missing person cases throughout history are simply victims who accidentally slipped through the cracks of reality and they couldn't find their way back out. And even worse, the dimension is highly unstable. It acts like a sponge, siphoning information from our world. That's why we start seeing fully furnished houses and random city streets mashed into the yellow maze. And on top of that, in the movie, the memories of its human victims who dared to enter are being used to recreate another reality. That's where it's getting the information from. But it's not only that. This actually explains the incredible high electricity bills at Clark's furniture store. It wasn't simply a faulty electrical circuit that he couldn't fix. The invisible doorway hidden in his basement was actively draining power from his building's grid to sustain the portal. And this constant unexplained energy drain severely worsened his financial struggles and played a direct role in pushing his mind to break. And that breaking point is the key to unlocking the true horror of this entire movie, because the Backrooms actively weaponizes your trauma. And to fully grasp the nature of the monster entities stalking these yellow Backrooms, we first need to examine Clark, the main character of the movie. As we peel back the layers of his psychology, it becomes terrifyingly clear that the monster he is running from is just a distorted reflection of the man himself. Clark is an alcoholic, divorced, failed architect who has to sleep in the beds of his own failing furniture store. He spends his days shooting humiliating low-budget commercials dressed as a pirate just to keep the lights on. But his biggest flaw is that he refuses to take accountability. He blames his problems on everyone else. However, we have to look at the foreshadowing at the very beginning of the movie. In his first meeting with his shrink, Mary, they perform a role-playing exercise to unpack the exact moment that led to his divorce. Clark comes home drunk and shatters a glass, which wakes up his wife. This was the final straw that ruined his life, as their argument led to Clark expressing how he paid for everything and his wife should get off her fat ass and work. During this scene, you can immediately tell Clark is unhinged. He refuses to take the blame for anything, and his rage is what causes pain to everyone around him, which he admits himself that throughout his life, all he has ever done is cause people to suffer. So in the end, he repeats that he lost the house he paid for, and this specific traumatic memory is what the Backroom feeds upon. Because when he falls into its dimension, he actually becomes obsessed with it. For Clark, it's an escape from his tragic reality. However, when he informs his therapist about it, the movie drops a legendary line. It's like describing a dog to someone who's never seen one, then asking them to draw it. Now, at first, Mary thinks Clark has simply lost his mind, but her concern and curiosity ultimately got the better of her. She descends into the backrooms hoping to rescue Clark, only to become trapped in the maze herself. But the true nightmare begins when she finally crosses paths with him, and rather than helping her escape, Clark completely betrays her. She gets knocked out and wakes up tied to a chair at a dinner table. Sitting with Clark is a distorted copy of his ex-wife, a random dude and a fat guy. The Backrooms recreated these people, but the copies are always imperfect as they are fragments of a memory. That's why the creations appear deformed and monstrous. However, Clark has completely lost his mind and accepted this dimension. He chooses to stay in the Backrooms because it's an echo chamber, much like how we are in our own bubbles of algorithms based on our watch history. Staying inside that bubble can make anyone go extreme in their beliefs if they consume that content long enough. As a result, because Clark stays in the dimension, it gives him fake copies of people who never criticize him. It affirms his delusions. So to prove a point to Mary, he literally walks over to the fat dude and stabs him in the neck and rips his stomach open and claims that he has even eaten them. But what about the monster? Well, the creature stalking them is a reflection of Clark. He hated that humiliating pirate suit, and he hated his own pathetic life. The dimension mixed his self-loathing with his memories to spawn a giant twisted reflection of his failure. The backroom highlights all of Clark's worst traits as a violent, abusive alcoholic, right back at him as a monster. Like, take the still life of the woman in red, who is clearly a misremembered version of his wife. During the dinner scene, she runs away in pure fear as a direct reflection of him being abusive to her in the real world. And the mechanics of how this monster attacks is brilliant. The monster and Clark share a mind, and for the most of the movie, the pirate doesn't kill Clark because Clark believes he's an innocent victim. But during the dinner scene with his therapist, Mary ruthlessly calls Clark out. She forces him to realize his ruined life is his own fault. This exact moment is when Clark is forced to acknowledge his role that, yeah, I'm the bad guy. So the monster, it registers the very same thought. However, instead of taking accountability, Clark insists to the entity that they don't need to change at all. So by fully embracing his most destructive traits rather than showing growth, he seals his own fate. The monster simply mirrors his violent mindset and eats him alive. And Clark even bragged earlier on that he could eat these entities without any consequences. And the Backrooms just copied his own twisted behavior and ate him back. But let's talk about the massive prequel theory the community is going crazy over. The movie takes place in 1990, and Kane Pixel's original YouTube series, it features an iconic black wire-like bacteria monster that starts in 1996. So the theory goes that the pirate monster, with its skinny peg legs, it rots, molds and degrades over 6 years inside the dimension until it literally becomes the classic YouTube monster that we know. ASYNC even captures the pirate at the end of the film, which means they could be testing on it right up until the events of the web series. And if you want to take the deeper message of this film even deeper, King Parsons seems to be actually giving a terrifying metaphor for artificial intelligence. Like, think about how the Backrooms operate. It's a living entity that endlessly generates copies of the real world, but it can never truly be perfect. The movie highlights this when we see the multiple levels of Mary's childhood room, where it's copied over and over and over again. But by the final copy, the chairs are mangled and the windows are just blank squares on a wall, no longer making any coherent sense. It is the exact same mechanic as asking an AI image generator to copy a photo multiple times until it becomes so distorted and unrecognizable to the original. And this completely validates the prequel theory. The classic bacteria monster from the YouTube series is likely just a still life copy that got replicated so many times over the years that it lost even a vague resemblance to being a human. It makes total sense when you look closely at Pirate Clark's hideout. It's filled with clothes and dead bodies, exactly like the bacteria's lair. And now we can explain the ending. The entire movie is essentially a deep dive into how trauma can act as a literal prison. So just like Clark, Mary is completely trapped by her past too. We find out she was raised in this abusive household where she was totally cut off from the outside world. She still gets reoccurring nightmares, and there's this crazy symbolic detail that you cannot miss, where even after her childhood home gets demolished, her little handprint is still permanently imprinted in the cement of the driveway, which means her past literally left a permanent mark on her. This brings us to an important realization about Mary's past. Early on in the movie, Mary confirms that she has had to 5150 patients before when Clark asked her about it, placing them on involuntary psychiatric holds for being a danger to themselves or others. This all clicks into place when Clark tells her, "I'm doing this for your own good." Hearing that exact phrase triggers a flashback of her mother, confirming that Mary committed her mother for her own good. This decision ate away at Mary for decades. She wrestled with guilt, constantly wondering, maybe if I had done things differently, I could have saved her. But her journey through the backrooms forces her to realize that she can't save everyone. Some things are simply out of her control. For instance, when Mary watches an ad of her book on TV, she skeptically listens to her own voice talk about how it is never too late to forge a new path. She then hosts a house party, but struggles to connect with her guests and enviously eyes a mother assembling a puzzle with her mother. However, by the end, there is an amazing moment where Mary breaks the stone on Clark's monster, which represents Mary finally letting go of her trauma and embracing the difficult choices she had to make. Even though Clark had found his supposed new path, he couldn't be saved. So when Mary escapes the backrooms in the end, she's intercepted by ASYNC scientists in hazmat suits. ASYNC would like to protect the biggest secret in human history. I mean, they have even killed people to keep the project quiet before. So when Mary asks if she can leave, they just dodge the question. This means she will either be executed or locked at sight for the rest of her life. On top of that, the backrooms now remembers her. That final shot of the deformed Mary is the dimension keeping a half-remembered version of her locked inside its walls forever. But let me know your thoughts below. And